The sound of fabric tearing echoed through Murphy's tavern like a gunshot. Every head turned. At the center of the bar, a biker had just ripped the shirt off a quiet black woman. But the moment her back was exposed, the room froze. 30 men, hardened bikers, used to violence, stood completely still. What they saw on her back wasn't just a tattoo. It was something that stopped them cold. To understand why one image could silence a gang of killers, we need to go back 6 months. That night in Murphy's tavern, the sound of ripping fabric sliced through the noise like a knife. For a split second, no one breathed. Yellow light poured over Maya Thompson's back as her torn shirt fell to the floor. The smoke in the room seemed to hang still, trapped in midair. A dozen bikers surrounded her, leather and steel closing in, boots scraping against the sticky floorboards. But not one of them moved. All eyes were fixed on the tattoo covering Maya's skin. The bar, usually loud with music, laughter, and drunken shouts, was dead silent. Rex Morrison, the gang leader who had ripped her shirt, still held his knife, but his hand trembled. The confidence he always wore like armor began to crack. And for the first time, fear crept into his eyes. "Holy, what the hell is that?" one of the bikers whispered, his voice slicing through the silence. It wasn't a shout, but it hit the room harder than a punch. Even the jukebox paused mid-song, as if afraid to break the moment. Every man stared at the tattoo, an image that seemed to pull the air out of the room. Rex blinked, trying to find words, but none came. Sweat glistened on his forehead under the harsh lights. He had meant to humiliate her, to show dominance. Instead, he had revealed something he couldn't understand. Maya didn't flinch. Her shoulders straightened, not in fear, not in shame, but in quiet control. The air shifted. Power had changed hands, and everyone could feel it. Behind the counter, old Murphy O'Brien, the bartender, watched with a trembling hand. He'd seen that kind of stillness before, the kind born from war, from survival. The bikers saw a tattoo. Murphy saw a story. Outside, the summer night pressed against the windows. Inside, time stopped. No one spoke. No one dared move. Everyone knew something had changed forever. But to understand how a single tattoo could paralyze a room full of killers, you have to go back 6 months. To the night Maya Thompson first walked through those doors, carrying ghosts no one in Murphy's tavern was ready to face. 6 months earlier, Murphy's tavern hadn't changed in decades. The same old bar stools with cracked leather. The same wooden tables covered in carved initials. The same jukebox playing the same 20 songs. It was the kind of place where time moved slow, and the air carried memories of smoke and whiskey. That Tuesday night, Maya Thompson walked in for the first time. She carried a small duffel bag and an expression no one could read. She spoke little, moved carefully, and seemed to be measuring every inch of the room. Murphy, the owner, was polishing a glass behind the counter. His silver hair and weathered face carried stories of battles no one asked about anymore. He looked at her, saw something familiar in her eyes, and simply said, "You can start tomorrow." No questions. No forms. No past. Just a quiet understanding between two people who had both seen things they couldn't forget. Maya Thompson kept to herself. Behind the bar, she always worked with her back against the wall. Never exposed, never careless. Every 30 seconds, her eyes swept across the room in perfect rhythm. First the exits, then the customers' hands, then their faces. To most, it looked like habit. But anyone who had ever worn a uniform would recognize it instantly. It was training. Even the way she cleaned glasses had precision. Every movement was deliberate, each pause intentional. At 5'6", slim and quiet, she seemed delicate. But anyone paying attention would notice the truth. How her fingers naturally found balance in everything she touched, how she always leaned slightly away from anyone who came too close, instinctively calculating space and distance. Murphy O'Brien, the old bartender and owner, noticed all of it. He'd seen too many soldiers return from wars, some from jungles, others from deserts, their eyes carrying things they never spoke of. He watched Maya and said quietly to his wife that night, "That girl's got ghosts." His wife didn't disagree. She'd seen them too. Upstairs, in the small room that came with the job, Maya lived alone and in silence. The space was tiny, but to her, it was safety. 4 walls she could control, one door she could lock. But even there, the war found her. Every night at exactly 3:17 a.m., she woke up gasping, the smell of burning metal in her mind. Her heart raced, her body tense, her right hand searching for the rifle sling that wasn't there. Instead, her fingers brushed the raised scars on her shoulder, healed on the surface, but alive underneath. In the darkness, she buried her screams into her pillow so no one below would hear. She slowed her breathing, matching it to the distant hum of passing cars until the terror faded and the world came back. Then she sat on the edge of her bed, eyes locked on the window, waiting for the first light of dawn. By day, she hid the evidence, long sleeves even in the heat, covering the stories carved into her skin. Behind the bar, she stayed quiet, speaking only when necessary. To new customers, it seemed like coldness. To regulars, it was something else. They learned that her silence wasn't distance, it was discipline. When she sliced limes for drinks, the knife flashed in her hand with a soldier's control, not a bartender's ease. Conversations often slowed when she worked. People sensed something different about her, a history just under the surface. Murphy saw it too. The way she always faced the door. The way her shoulders tensed when someone dropped a glass. One Friday night, when the jukebox screeched mid-song, Maya flinched before anyone else, eyes scanning the exits, jaw locked tight. It wasn't just surprise. It was memory. A reflex from someone who had once heard explosions instead of music. No one in town asked questions. They were used to drifters with secrets and debts. But Murphy knew better. There's a difference between carrying secrets and carrying scars. He let her be, the same way he wished people had let him be after Vietnam. Still, even the strongest discipline can't silence instinct. One evening, the distant rumble of Harley engines rolled down the street. They were still far away, the windows didn't even shake, but Maya's hand froze mid-motion. The glass cloth trembled. Her chest tightened. For a moment, fear climbed her spine. And deep down, she knew, the past was coming back. Maya forced her trembling fingers to be still. She set the glass down gently and managed a tight smile, pretending nothing had happened. To anyone watching, it was just a pause, barely noticeable. But Murphy saw it. He caught the slight shake in her hand, the effort it took to hide it. He knew that look, the way old wounds sometimes scream louder than fresh ones. He didn't say a word. Just kept polishing his glass, letting her have her silence. Maya took a slow breath, burying the shiver inside her. Around them, the jukebox kept playing its same tired tunes, the laughter of customers filled the air, and everything at Murphy's tavern seemed normal again. But beneath that calm, something had already shifted. Friday nights at Murphy's had a rhythm of their own. By 8 o'clock, the deep rumble of Harley engines rolled down the street, a sound that made the windows tremble and conversations falter mid-sentence. Couples hurried to leave. Regulars settled their tabs early. Even the drunks sobered up fast. Because when the Steel Wolves Motorcycle Club arrived, they didn't just walk in, they took over. Their presence filled the air like smoke you couldn't escape. Behind the bar, Murphy reached for an old envelope he always kept ready, $500 in worn 20s. He counted it carefully, as if the ritual itself might protect him. Moments later, Rex Morrison pushed through the door. Tall, broad, covered in tattoos and scars, he carried himself like he owned the place. And in a way, he did, at least every Friday night. "Same as always," Murphy muttered, his voice low, his hand trembling just enough to show fear he'd never admit. Rex flipped through the money without really looking, then tossed it to one of his men. He leaned over the counter, his breath thick with whiskey, and said, "You're lucky I'm generous, old man." Murphy nodded. It was safer than answering. From her place behind the bar, Maya watched quietly. Her face was calm, but her fingers tightened around the rag in her hand until her knuckles turned white. She kept her movements steady, no sudden gestures, no signs of defiance. She'd learned long ago that sometimes survival meant silence. That night, her silence was tested. Later, while taking out the trash, Maya heard it, a scream. Sharp. Panicked. Human. She froze. Her pulse quickened as she moved toward the alley behind the tavern. Under the flickering yellow streetlight, Rex Morrison was beating a man, Jimmy Chen, the owner of the small electronics shop down the street. Jimmy's family had run that store for years, but lately he'd fallen behind on payments. Now he was paying in a different way. Rex's boot came down again and again. His men laughed as one of them filmed it on a phone, proof of their power, cruelty on display. Jimmy gasped for air, curling up to shield his ribs, but the blows didn't stop. Maya's whole body tightened like a spring. Her hand clenched so hard her nails broke the skin, a bead of blood forming in her palm. Every instinct in her screamed to act, to end it. She could already see the sequence in her head, the angles, the timing. 2 men down before the others even reacted. She knew she could do it. But she didn't move. She forced herself to stay still, whispering into the night. "Not my fight. Not tonight." And then she turned away, each step heavier than the last. The sound of Jimmy's cries followed Maya back inside, faint but impossible to forget. She walked to the bar and bent down to pick up a broken bottle left on the floor. As she leaned forward, the collar of her shirt slipped just slightly, revealing a thin scar along her jaw, pale against her dark skin. It was visible for only a second before she pulled her hair forward to hide it again. No one noticed. But the scar said more than she ever would. The jukebox stumbled into another old tune, something from decades ago. The music didn't lift the mood. It just filled the silence. Murphy kept polishing the same glass, lost in thought. Maya arranged bottles behind the bar, her hand steady even though her heart was not. She had seen men beaten before. She had seen worse. But this moment cut deeper, not because of what she saw, but because she had turned away. Later that night, after the steel wolves had gone and the street was quiet again, Maya sat on the edge of her bed upstairs. The blood from her clenched fist had dried, tiny red crescents where her nails had dug into her palm. She pressed her hands together and whispered the words she'd repeated in the alley. "Not my fight. Not tonight." But in the silence of that small room, the words didn't sound like strength anymore. They sounded like surrender. Outside, the town sank into darkness, the echo of motorcycle engines still rolling through the streets like thunder that refused to fade. The next Friday began like any other, but something felt off, heavier, tighter, as if even the walls of Murphy's tavern were holding their breath. Behind the bar, Murphy counted out the familiar $500 into the old envelope, his hands trembling a little more than usual. He tried to steady them by wiping the counter, but the shaking wouldn't stop. Maya noticed. She always did. Her eyes moved in their quiet rhythm, exits, hands, faces, and though nothing had happened yet, she could feel the tension in the air. It was sharp, metallic, like the taste of blood before it spilled. Then came the sound. The engines. Louder this time. Closer. The front door burst open, slamming against the wall so hard it cut the jukebox off mid-song. 8 bikers stormed in, boots heavy, jackets covered in patches that spoke more of violence than brotherhood. Rex Morrison entered last, slower than the rest, like a man who enjoyed being feared. He was tall, broad, and carried himself with the confidence of someone who believed the world owed him submission. His eyes scanned the room, savoring the way conversation died and patrons quietly slipped away. Murphy placed the envelope on the bar and slid it forward with a tired sigh. "That's everything," he said, voice low. Rex didn't reach for it. Instead, he dragged a chair over, flipped it backward, and straddled it like a throne. His men spread out, knocking over drinks and laughing too loudly, noise meant to intimidate. After a long pause, Rex spoke. His voice was smooth, but every word carried an edge. "Agreements change." Murphy's throat tightened. "Rex, we agreed on 500. Rex smirked, tapping his thick finger on the counter. "Economy's tough, old man. My boys need more. 800, starting tonight." The number landed like a punch. Murphy's shoulders sank. Years of fear and exhaustion pulled him down. Behind him, the bottles rattled softly as Maya adjusted her stance. The towel in her hands twisted tighter and tighter without her realizing it. The regulars kept their heads down, pretending not to see. Eyes fixed on their drinks. On the floor. Anywhere but the storm foaming in the center of the bar. For months, Maya had been part of the background, quiet, unnoticed. But that night, something in her began to shift. That night, something shifted inside Murphy's tavern. Rex saw her. His eyes moved from Murphy to Maya, staying on her longer than they should have, studying her calm, her silence, the way she didn't react when his men laughed crudely. He tilted his head, a smirk forming, as if trying to solve a mystery he'd just discovered. Murphy noticed it too. His stomach tightened. Rex was dangerous when he was after money, but when he got curious, when he found a new target, that danger became something far worse. "What's your name?" Rex suddenly asked, his voice slicing through the noise. The tavern went quiet. Maya didn't respond. She kept wiping the counter, slow and steady, her face blank, her breathing calm. Rex let out a low, menacing chuckle and leaned closer, eyes locked on her. "Don't worry," he said, almost teasing. "We've got time to get to know each other." The words hung in the thick air, heavier than the smell of beer. Murphy's hand tightened around the rag under the bar. He'd prayed for months that the girl would stay invisible, that men like Rex would never notice her. But tonight was different. Rex had seen her. And once Rex set his eyes on someone, he never let go. The air felt colder, even as the summer heat pressed against the windows. This wasn't just about money anymore. For the first time since she'd started working there, Maya Thompson wasn't a shadow. She'd been noticed, and the storm had found her. Rex tipped his beer, slowly, deliberately. The amber liquid spilled onto the floor, spreading into a sticky puddle at Murphy's feet. "Clean it up," he ordered, voice calm but cutting. Murphy froze, pride and age stiffening his shoulders. But Rex's stare left no room for defiance. With a heavy breath, the old man bent down, reaching for the rag. The bar was silent, every eye fixed on the man being humiliated in his own place. Then, without warning, Rex kicked. His boot struck Murphy in the face. The crack echoed through the tavern. Blood trickled from Murphy's lip, a drop hitting the floor with a soft tick that felt louder than any shout. Rex laughed, a cold, empty laugh. "That's what happens when you forget who's in charge," he said, leaning back as his men grinned. Before Murphy could fall, before shame and pain could pull him down completely, Maya moved. She stepped out from behind the bar, walking toward them with a calm that silenced even Rex's men. She stopped between him and Murphy, her small frame standing firm. For a long moment, no one spoke. The jukebox clicked and failed to play. The only sounds were the hum of neon and the slow drip of blood. Maya looked straight at Rex. Her eyes didn't flinch or lower. Rex frowned. He was used to fear, to people shrinking away before he even raised a hand. But she didn't. His smirk faltered, then returned. "You got something to say, sweetheart," he mocked. The silence stretched, heavy as smoke. Then Maya spoke, her voice steady, calm, and strong. "That's not how warriors solve problems." The words hit the room like a hammer. Not angry. Not loud. Just certain. And for the first time that night, Rex didn't have a response. It was as if someone had snapped an invisible chain around Rex's neck. His men shifted uncomfortably, feeling something in the air they couldn't name. Behind Maya, Murphy lifted his head. There was something in her voice, something that reached into his past, the same tone he'd once heard in jungles and firefights, from soldiers who refused to back down. The room itself seemed to hold its breath, drawn toward the quiet power of her defiance. Rex stood up slowly, his full height towering over her, shadows stretching across the floor. He tried to smother her with his size, with his presence. But Maya didn't move. Didn't blink. The towel hung loose in her hand, yet she stood rooted, solid as stone. For the first time, Rex Morrison felt something unfamiliar, doubt. He growled, trying to shake it off, trying to reclaim the control he'd always had. But it was too late. In his own territory, surrounded by his men, Rex had been challenged, and not by another gangster, but by a woman who looked fragile until she spoke. She stared at him as if she already knew his measure, and found him small. The bar was frozen in silence. 30 people stood trapped in a single moment between humiliation and revelation. No one knew what would happen next, but everyone understood one thing. The balance of power had changed. Rex Morrison had been exposed. And Maya Thompson was no longer a shadow. The room exploded. Rex lunged forward like a charging bull, his chair splintering behind him. Maya moved, quick, precise, controlled. She sidestepped, using his own momentum against him. He crashed into a table, smashing it to pieces. Bottles shattered, glass scattered, and beer sprayed across the walls. His men, the steel wolves, surged forward, rage flashing in their eyes, hands reaching for knives and chains. The quiet tavern had become a battlefield. Maya grabbed a broken bottle, gripping it not like a drunk in a fight, but like a soldier with a weapon. Her stance was steady. "Stay back," she said. Her voice cut through the noise, calm, commanding, trained. The men hesitated. Something in her tone froze them, the kind of voice you only hear from people used to being obeyed under fire. But Rex rose again, blood and fury burning on his face. Humiliation clung to him like sweat. He lunged again and this time caught her shirt. The fabric tore with a sound sharp as a gunshot. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. Even the jukebox went silent. Under the harsh light, her back was exposed, and what they saw silenced the room. A tattoo covered her skin, the insignia of Delta Force, a sword and 3 lightning bolts. Beneath it, words inked deep. Sergeant Maya Thompson. Purple Heart. Operation Enduring Freedom 2019 to 2022. Below that, dog tags etched with the words, "Never forgotten." It wasn't decoration. It was truth and declaration. Rex's hands fell away. His mouth opened but no sound came. Around them, the entire tavern inhaled as one. 30 witnesses stared at what the ink revealed, a soldier, not a bartender. And then, Maya's mind broke open. Kandahar. The explosion hit like thunder from the earth. Their vehicle flipped, sand and metal and fire swallowing the night. Maya tasted blood and dust as she dragged herself upright, ears ringing, chaos everywhere. "Stay with me, Williams. Stay with me," she shouted, pulling her bleeding comrade toward cover. His leg was gone. Her shoulder burned from shrapnel, but she didn't stop. Bullets ripped the sand around her, and still, she pulled. Back in Murphy's tavern, her breathing quickened, shallow, uneven. Rex saw it, the tremor, the faraway look, and smiled cruelly. "Purple Heart, huh?" he sneered. "Means you got hurt. Means you failed." His voice dripped with venom. "How many of your team came home in boxes because you weren't good enough?" The words hit harder than any punch. Maya's jaw tightened. Her eyes clouded with pain. The tremor in her hand grew, the one that came when the memories took hold. She was back there again, hearing gunfire, the medevac pilot shouting over the radio. "We can't land. Too many wounded." She remembered the choices she made, who she could save, who she couldn't. And those ghosts never left. Rex leaned closer, savoring the hurt in her eyes. "There it is," he whispered. "The crazy. You gonna cry?" Rex sneered, circling her. "Go on then, soldier," he hissed. "You gonna run again?" But Maya didn't move. She didn't even breathe for a moment. Then, slowly, she straightened, the trembling gone, replaced by a stillness that felt older than fear. When she spoke, her voice was low but carried to every corner of the bar. "You know nothing about sacrifice," she said. "Nothing about holding lives in your hands. About making choices no one should ever have to make while bullets rain down." Her words cut through the smoke, heavier than the shattered glass scattered across the floor. Rex blinked, thrown off by her calm. The room shifted with her. The people inside weren't looking at him anymore. They were looking at her. And in their eyes, something changed. Tommy "Bulldog" Martinez, Rex's right-hand man, froze. 2 tours in Iraq had left his own scars, and as his eyes locked on Maya's tattoo, the color drained from his face. "Holy shit," he whispered, barely audible. "She's Delta." The words rippled through the tavern like a live wire. Whispers followed, quiet but unstoppable. "Delta Force. She's Delta." To most civilians, the name carried mythic weight. But to the few who'd served, it meant something deeper, missions no one would ever read about, victories that would never be known. It meant warriors who'd seen the darkest corners of war and kept moving forward anyway. Rex's mask slipped. His smirk faltered, confusion flickering in his eyes. He tried to recover, forcing a laugh that cracked halfway through. "Oh, this is rich," he sneered. "Murphy's got himself a broken toy soldier." He circled her again, desperate to find the power he was losing. "That medal of yours, the Purple Heart? That's proof you failed. Proof you weren't strong enough. But no one laughed. Not even his men. Tommy shifted his stance, no longer standing with Rex, but against him. The air in the room changed. The story had been rewritten right before their eyes. The predator was no longer in control. Maya didn't blink. She lifted her chin, and the light caught the scar along her jaw. "This tattoo," she said, her voice clear, steady, a voice that carried the weight of deserts and flag-covered coffins, "means I went to hell and came back. It means I bled for a country that forgets its soldiers until it needs them again. And it means I'm still standing." The tavern, once filled with fear, now hummed with awe. A warrior had stepped out of the shadows. And the storm was just beginning. Rex swung first, wild with rage. He never stood a chance. Maya moved faster than thought, not out of anger, but training. One moment he was charging, the next he was flat on the floor, the air knocked from his lungs. She dropped with him, knee pressing into his back, her weight perfectly balanced. One arm twisted his wrist in a lock designed to end the fight without ending the man. His knife slipped loose, clattering across the floor until it came to rest beneath a shattered chair. No one spoke. No one had ever seen Rex Morrison on the ground. Not here, not anywhere. His entire reputation had been built on the myth that he couldn't be challenged. And now, a woman half his size had him pinned to the floorboards. "I don't want to hurt anyone," Maya said, her voice calm, almost gentle. "But I will protect the people I care about." The words landed heavy. They weren't a threat. They were a promise. For a long moment, the room stayed still. Then, from the back, an older man stood, his gray hair cut short, his voice steady and sure. "You're talking to a damn hero," he said, pointing at her. His tone left no room for doubt. Heads turned. Something in the crowd broke open. A woman near the bar, apron still tied at her waist, clutched a photo of her brother serving overseas. Her voice shook, but her words didn't. "She served this country while you were tearing it apart," she said, glaring at Rex. "She's worth 10 of you." Murmurs spread, stronger now, angrier. "We saw what you did to Jimmy Chen. You've taken enough from this town." The fear that had ruled the tavern for years cracked and fell away. What replaced it wasn't just courage, it was unity. For the first time, the people of Murphy's Tavern weren't afraid of Rex Morrison. They were ready to stand with Maya Thompson. Tommy "Bulldog" Martinez stood closest. His eyes locked on the Delta Force insignia inked across Maya's back, on the steadiness of her grip, on the discipline in her stance. 2 tours in Iraq still haunted him, the ghosts never far. But at that moment, something inside him shifted. He stepped forward, past Rex's flailing boots, and nudged the fallen knife away with his boot. The metal scraped across the wooden floor, harmless now. His voice was low, calm, and final. "Stay down, Rex. You've lost." The words hung heavy in the air. Silence followed, broken only by Rex's muffled curses. His own lieutenant had turned against him. Around them, the wolves exchanged uneasy glances. The certainty in their leader was crumbling as fast as his pride. Loyalty built on fear is fragile, and tonight, it finally snapped. 2 of the younger bikers stepped back, hands half raised, signaling they wanted no part of this. They weren't here for war, not against someone like her. Maya stayed where she was, holding Rex down, her movements controlled and deliberate. She could have ended it, one quick twist, one strike, but she didn't. That restraint spoke louder than violence ever could. It told everyone watching that she wasn't there to destroy. She was there to protect. Murphy, blood still trickling from his lip, pushed himself to his feet. His voice, rough but steady, filled the room. "This is our bar," he said. "And she's one of us." The words lit something in the air. Patrons stood, one by one, forming a loose wall behind Maya. They weren't fighters, not soldiers, but they found courage in her defiance. 30 hearts beating together, no longer afraid. Rex struggled again, but the power was gone from his body. He wasn't the wolf anymore, just a man pinned to the floor, stripped of his myth in front of the people he once ruled through fear. The wolves looked around, uncertain. Their confidence unraveled with every passing second. 4 years, they had walked into Murphy's Tavern as if it belonged to them. Tonight, it didn't. Tonight, It belonged to everyone who refused to bow. And just like that, the legend of Rex Morrison broke, not under fists or knives, but under the quiet, unstoppable weight of unity. Months later, Murphy's Tavern was unrecognizable. The air no longer smelled only of beer and smoke, it carried the warmth of coffee, fresh paint, and new beginnings. The place that had once been a refuge for broken souls had become something far more powerful. Along one wall, a wall of honor now stretched from corner to corner, photographs of veterans, young and old, taped beside handwritten notes and dog tags. Some notes were signed with shaky hands, others with pride, but all carried stories of survival. Every Thursday, chairs were pulled into a circle. Maya stood at the center, not as a bartender, not as a shadow, but as a leader. She guided the group through long, honest conversations. Some nights they cried. Some nights they sat in silence. Other nights, laughter echoed through the tavern like music no one thought they'd hear again. Through it all, Maya reminded them of a truth she had learned the hardest way possible. Scars aren't signs of weakness, she told them. They're proof that we're still here. Word of what had happened spread far beyond their small town. A shaky phone video of Rex's defeat had gone viral, shared by veterans groups, women's organizations, and people who saw in Maya a reflection of quiet strength. Headlines followed. Female Delta Force veteran stands up to biker gang. Survivor turns local bar into safe haven. Then came the cameras. But they didn't find her fighting. They found her serving coffee to a trembling veteran, helping a widow through her grief, and standing beside Murphy as they rebuilt what fear had nearly destroyed. Donations poured in from across the country. Letters, cards, folded flags, and messages from people who said the same thing in different words. You reminded us what courage looks like. Veterans organizations reached out. Universities invited her to speak. Maya declined most at first. She preferred the quiet rhythm of the tavern, the hum of conversation, the simple work of rebuilding lives one cup of coffee at a time. But the calls kept coming. One day, a young woman stepped through the door and froze just inside the entrance. Her eyes darted to the exits, counting faces. Her hands trembled. Her breath came in shallow bursts. Maya recognized it instantly. I'm Jessica Chen, the young woman said, her voice barely above a whisper. Army medic. Syria. 2 months back. The words came out like fragments of glass, painful, sharp, unfinished. She spoke of the ambush, the men she couldn't save, the nights she couldn't close her eyes without seeing them again. Tears shimmered. Her composure cracked. I saw your story online, Jessica managed. My mom sent me the article. I sat outside in my car for an hour before I got the courage to come in. Maya slid into the booth across from her. Quietly, she rolled up her sleeve, showing the shrapnel scars along her forearm. 6 months ago, she said softly, I was hiding from my own shadow. I thought scars meant I was broken. But they don't. They mean we survived. Jessica's shoulders sagged. The weight she carried began to lift, even if just a little. Murphy appeared with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His nod said everything. For Jessica, that moment was salvation. For Maya, it was proof. Proof that sharing the darkest corners of her story could light the way for someone else. Word spread. Soon veterans drove hours just to sit in Murphy's Tavern, to listen, to speak, to breathe again. Families came too. Mothers, fathers, sons, desperate to understand the silence at their dinner tables. A movement was born. Weekly support circles became monthly job fairs. Local therapists offered free counseling nights. Even a congresswoman visited, listening as Maya spoke about the distance between veterans and the help they needed. Then came the invitation she couldn't ignore. Washington. A hearing before the Armed Services Committee. Maya arrived with Murphy, Jessica, and Tommy Martinez, once a biker, now a mechanic who hired only veterans. They sat behind her as she faced the long row of lawmakers and cameras. Maya adjusted the microphone. The Delta Force tattoo peeked beneath her blazer. Her voice was steady. Every day, 22 veterans take their own lives, she began. Not because they are weak, but because they are fighting alone. We don't need perfect soldiers. We need honest scars. The room went still. Even the committee members, hardened by years of testimony, leaned forward. She spoke of Murphy's Tavern, the lives rebuilt within its walls, the families restored, the courage reborn. She didn't ask for another study or report. She asked for action, for connection, for hope. The applause that followed wasn't loud. It was reverent. Her proposal passed, unanimously. Back home, the tavern was full again. Jessica smiled brighter than Maya had ever seen. Murphy raised his glass high. "To Maya Thompson," he said, voice hoarse but proud, "who showed us that strength isn't hiding your scars, it's sharing them." Glasses clinked. Tears shimmered. The words etched themselves into every heart that night. No one fights alone. It could have ended there, with applause, headlines, and policy wins. But Maya knew better. Wars don't end with signatures or speeches. They end when someone chooses, day after day, to keep living, to keep helping, to keep showing up. Weeks later, on a quiet Thursday night, her phone buzzed. A number she didn't recognize. A voice shaking on the other end. A veteran on the edge. Maya answered without hesitation. "This is Maya," she said softly. "You're not alone. Let's talk." And just like that, the cycle began again. One scar becoming a story. One story becoming a beacon. One beacon igniting a movement. From a torn shirt on a summer night to the halls of Congress. From shame hidden beneath long sleeves to hope worn like armor. Maya Thompson had proven one simple truth. The greatest revolutions don't begin with armies or governments. They begin with one person refusing to hide.